The following podcast contains adult language and themes. Listener discretion is advised.
Picture this. You're walking down the street. You've got places to go, things to do. Up ahead, a person begins approaching. You notice they look a little disheveled. Their clothes are kind of dirty. They aren't exactly well groomed. What's your first instinct? Do you avoid making eye contact? Perhaps they make you a little nervous. Are they going to ask me for money? Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. They might just be talking to themselves. And, you were able to pass by them without any interaction or hiccup to your busy day. Stop. Let's unpack this for a moment. Look, this isn't a guilt trip. It's an opportunity for reflection. We live in a society built on privilege and convenience. That doesn't mean your life is free from hardships or struggles. You absolutely have your own problems to deal with. But if you have a roof over your head, food on your plate, and people who love you, your basic needs are being met. In our thousands of years of human civilization and social evolution, how is it that people still wind up living on the streets or in uninhabitable environments? Are they unfit for society? Maybe they're a different breed altogether. You probably don't spend much time thinking about this, and you absolutely avoid discussing it. So then where are these conversations happening? We hear a lot about these people in the media.
You can't give them a choice. Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
And from politicians.
The homeless have no right to turn every park and sidewalk into a place for them to squat and do drugs.
As long as someone's thinking about it and taking the time to discuss it, I don't have to worry about it, we tell ourselves. So when I walk by that man holding a sign and asking for a few bucks, I don't have to feel bad. It's not my problem. The system is in place to take care of them. Again, this isn't a guilt trip. It's just a reality check. You and that person begging for change on the corner aren't that far apart on the social scale. One major health problem, one financial crisis, one really bad week, and realistically, that could be you. The best way to avoid it is by not avoiding it. There is a moral, a social, and a financial imperative to acknowledge and resolve this crisis. Unless you're in the top 5% of wealth or you're holding out for a family inheritance, this does affect you. And they, even more than us, are the inheritors of a broken system.
Get ready to open your heart and your mind because we're going there. Taboo topics are back on the table.
Well, hi there. Thank you for joining us for another Season 3 episode of the Going There podcast. You know me. My name is Matt. I am your host, and we have 3 lovely people in the studio today to, more than anything, help restore my faith in humanity. But they're going to educate us on a very important topic and some of the things that we don't see or know about as the average citizen. So it is my genuine pleasure to introduce our guests, and I will start with the lovely lady to my right, Allison.
Good morning. I'm Allison Martzolf from Friends in Tents and Community Outreach. We're located in Summit County in Akron, Ohio.
Thank you for being here. Can't wait to talk more about Friends in Tents. Let's throw it over to our new friend, Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie Eastburn from Humble Design, Cleveland, and we're located in Solon.
And last but not least, Lerryn.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Lerryn Campbell. I'm the Executive Director of the Homeless Charity and Village, and we're located in Akron, Ohio.
Well, thank you for all being here. And obviously, anyone watching or listening knows what the topic is, but you see, we have 3 people who work for 3 different organizations who serve the community that gets forgotten about or overlooked or pushed to the side far too often. Let's just go around. What does your organization specifically do? And we'll start with you.
Our organization, we do community outreach, street outreach. We have a building that people can come to 4 days a week, get a meal, take a meal to go. We have a clothing boutique set up that they can shop for free.
How do they know to come to you guys? Do you guys have community outreach where you go out and you
Yes.
find people and say, hey, can we help you?
I think our biggest asset is we have a huge following on social media, on Facebook. That's generally how people know about us. And then when we go out into the camps, we share with people that they can come and see us. Most of them are regulars and come to see us on a regular basis.
You bring up an interesting point, though, when you said that. So you have social media. If this were 20 years ago, this question, I wouldn't ask it, but I am now. Do a lot of the unhoused, the people that you serve, still have cell phones and access to social media and the internet?
Yes.
Which is, we're going to get into myth busting and stigmas and stuff, but that is such a, I'm not saying good or bad. I'm saying that is a bizarre dynamic to really think about it. To think about Maslow's hierarchy and the needs, and like food and shelter comes first, but we do live in a society where you cannot exist off the grid as much as I would love to.
Yeah. I mean, some of them do live off the grid because that's just what they prefer. But, having access to a phone, is important, like for me, because then I can reach them. And most of them, it's, if they don't have a cellular plan, they at least can hook up to Wi-Fi and they check their messages and, get in touch with us. So, yes, it does seem awfully ironic sometimes, their technology.
Debbie, so Humble Design, loving the logo. Did you design Humbly, that logo yourself?
I did not.
Okay.
I cannot take credit for that. We actually started in Detroit in 2009. So Cleveland came about in 2020. I opened it, my staff lovingly says 5 minutes before the pandemic hit.
Oh, yeah.
So it was February 24th of 20. And we help folks who are coming out of homelessness. So their journey through homelessness has happened and they're getting themselves on their feet. And we help them when they secure housing, but it's empty and they have nothing. So they're still sleeping in their cars or on the floor when we meet them. We help individuals, families, and veterans turn that empty space into a beautiful, welcoming, and comfortable, safe home.
Does Humble Design partner with other organizations like Habitat for Humanity, places like that?
We do. We have over 45 referring agencies all throughout Cuyahoga County, and some outside of Cuyahoga County. And they're the ones who help the clients who need whatever support they need, whether that's chemical treatment help or domestic violence survivors that need support, and they refer those clients to us.
And Lerryn, the Homeless Charity and Village, what's the focus of your organization?
The Homeless Charity and Village's main focus is building community and building trust. Right? We can't move anyone forward if they don't trust what we're offering. And so we offer a backyard that is where all of our services, our soft services come in play. We have a food pantry that served 224,000 pounds of food last year. We average about 5,000 pounds a week. Folks come visit us every Tuesday for that. And then on Wednesdays, we offer sack lunches, toiletries, and we partner with Amazon. We get 30 boxes of miscellaneous Amazon items on that day. And so it's a real great opportunity for folks to forage for things that might bring them some comfort, but also are unexpected. And then on Thursdays, we host a hot meal, and we have local doctors from a local hospital that spend their lunch hour with us and provide street medicine. And then Saturdays is, again, a hot lunch and often clothing or those miscellaneous donations that come in. And by offering those 4 days of service, we can begin to break down barriers, get to know folks. And because we're in the backyard, it's kind of like going to grandma's house, right? People are just hanging out, visiting, and it gives us an opportunity in a real laid back way to just build that communication. And then when that person looks like they might need something different, we've built the trust and we're ready to launch them into what's next.
What I love is all 3 of you talked about both the tangible and the intangible. Like you're giving them actual necessities, physical necessities they need, but there's the soft skills, the soft necessities that you guys are applying. And that I think is the thing that is greatly forgotten about. Again, you guys are going to educate me today because I'm coming from the layman's side of the world of understanding this. You guys live this, but even just the little bit I've learned so far from our offline conversation, there's so much that gets overlooked and forgotten about. Let's real quick talk about each of you, your backgrounds, your position in the organization. Where do you fall? Are you volunteer? Are you full-time? Do you still have another job? And at this point, I'm not going to make us go in any order. So anybody can share.
All right. I'm happy to start. So I grew up in corporate America, and I think when my youngest was 5, I thought, I want to volunteer in school and see what else the world has to offer. And honestly, that is where I sort of fell in love with the idea of doing more and being able to help. And so I started my own consulting practice and worked with a lot of nonprofits. And it was just such a joy to be able to make a difference, and so many people who needed just a little bit of help and support. And so I found Humble Design. And
when you say you found it, you found them. You didn't founded it.
No, right. I did not found it. I did start Cleveland, but they actually found me when they were interested in becoming operational in Cleveland. We have just a wonderful connection. My corporate background was at Progressive Insurance, and they found Humble, really fell in love with that mission, and reached out to me and said, hey, I know you've been gone for a while and you're kind of doing your own thing, but we'd love to introduce you to this organization. So
are you now full-time?
I am. I'm the executive director. I'm full-time. I am heart and soul into Humble.
And humble is the key phrase there, because I was about to ask, do you don't have to say what or anything, but do you earn a salary?
I do.
A humble salary.
So it's really interesting that you say that, right? So I can't tell you how many people say to me when they come in the door at our warehouse, they say, you pay your designers, you pay your movers, because we have designers that help design the space and movers that move the furniture in. But we're also a small staff, so we have over 2,000 registered volunteers with us, and we rely very heavily on that volunteer power. But it is funny because I always say we could do this volunteer-wise, but we would never get to the impact we make today.
Right.
So we do this 3 times every week. In 3 days, we turn that empty house into a home. So we have just finished our 460th home in Cleveland since we began. Right,
460 homes over 5 years.
It's pretty amazing and impactful. And that's where, again, we're in an 18,000 square foot warehouse in Solon. I'd love if somebody wanted to give us a warehouse for free, but that isn't usually how it works. And,
right.
We have a truck and we have staff, and this way we really can make a difference and an impact for people.
Awesome.
The homeless charity is run on solely volunteer staff. I am the volunteer executive director, and we are completely operational with volunteers and a lot of partnerships. To Debbie's point, there are pros and cons to that, right?
Yeah.
So there are funders who want to see an organization that is founded in people who are paid because they feel like there's a longevity in that, right? And there are donors who prefer a volunteer-led organization where every dollar goes to the mission. And so we're always, as nonprofits, we're always on this balancing act. Like what is the most appropriate thing? So recently our board has brought to the table, investing in retirement for our staff that, is volunteering full time and not seeking retirement. So those are some ways that we balance that out a little bit. But proudly, I have been able to volunteer and lead this organization since July of 2020, but I have been in this space for over 30 years. So I started volunteering in the houseless community when I was a freshman at the University of Akron in 1992. So I still serve some of the same people who I served in 1992.
What got you into that in the first place?
I was looking for someplace. I came from a family that was filled with service. They were just, my parents were always volunteering somewhere. We always had someone that was under our helm. And so it was a part of my upbringing. And so I was looking for that space. And so there was a Catholic church in downtown Akron that still serves to this day, St. Bernard's. And
I was about to ask if it was St. Bernard's.
St. Bernard's. And so I would walk from my dorm at Orr Hall and I was also a voice minor, so I would often sing as I was walking along. And so I started gathering up folks. By the time we would get to St. Bernard's, there would be all of these people and we'd all be singing a song or we'd be joking. And so that's how I became in contact with this community. It was sort of just singing my way to St. Bernard's on a Wednesday night to serve. And to that end, it was 2015. I was standing outside of a shelter and I was singing and a gentleman came up to me and he said, "I've been wondering how I knew you." And I had met him back in 93 singing outside of St. Bernard's. And he was still experiencing homelessness. And we bridged a very beautiful relationship and he's been gone about a year now.
Oh.
Yep.
All right, Allison. How about you? What's your background?
I'm a middle school teacher. I've been a teacher for 25 years. I've taught elementary school. I've taught middle school. I'm not sure how I fell into all of this. It just sort of happened during COVID. I was teaching from home because we were remote, and I had we weren't teaching a full day, so someone suggested some volunteering, and I started doing that in Barberton where I live, and came across Friends in Tents looking for volunteers. They had recently acquired a building in Barberton, and I am sort of like second after our executive director. I run our community outreach, and I'm on the board. We're completely volunteer run, like Lerryn's organization. No one gets paid. Actually, everybody there, for the most part, has a full-time job. So this is everybody's sort of second full-time job. And then we have some women who volunteer that are retired. But yeah, I don't know. I never really volunteered a lot before. I didn't come from a family of people who were out volunteering, so I'm not sure where it came from.
I love it because all three of your stories are a little bit different with that. And there's something in us, whether it's nature or nurture, that drives us, impels us to do something, to make positive change. So according to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, the most recent data over the last couple of years suggests the highest levels of homelessness that have been recorded since we started collecting this data. And obviously, there's several factors. Some of it's public policy. A lot of it is high cost of housing, plus insufficient social safety nets. Incomes aren't keeping up with inflation and the cost of housing. We talked a little bit about, generational wealth comes from somebody at some point in your ancestry purchasing property more often than not, or some kind of assets that build interest and collect over time. When less and less people every year are able to attain those things, that generational wealth can turn into either a zero-sum game or generational poverty, which I'm sure is a lot of the population that you guys serve. So, we had a Zoom call to talk about this basic outline a couple weeks ago, and you all agreed that the piece of your job and work that is the most impactful and eats up a lot of the time is educating the public. Do you guys still stand behind that?
Yes.
Okay. That's what we're really here to do today. I have my own ignorance. I'm sure you guys can share to some degree. In this country, we are very privileged. In this country, we take things for granted. And, I would be a liar if I sat here and said, I've always cared about everybody. That's just not true. Some of it is just ignorance. It's not apathy. It's not, malice. So, I lived in Southern California around right around 9/11, and the homelessness is rampant out there. But it's also a little bit different because it's almost like at that time there was like stability to the entire population. But when you're in places, especially like Ohio, where you can't live outside during the winter. I love that your organization is called Friends in Tents, because you do see a lot of the tent towns and some of the tents, but how people like that survive, like what's happening outside right now in this horrible blizzard.
We do. We have over 300 that live outside all winter.
Yeah.
Right? Without shelter.
And I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying that should never be the case.
Correct.
So a lot of what we're going to do is myth bust. And that's my favorite thing to do, because I'm a nerd and I love the show Mythbusters, but also because there is so much stigma and so little of it is based in any kind of reality, right? So what are some of the most common myths that you guys see and hear from people outside the organization about homelessness and the people who experience it?
I'll jump us off on one that's so people assume that anyone panhandling is experiencing homelessness, right? Anyone with a sign outside of a grocery store, on a street corner, and that is far from the truth.
Right.
So there are plenty of people who panhandle in order to gain money, gain access to whatever goods they're looking for. But statistically speaking, those people are not experiencing unsheltered homelessness, right? There's a small population of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness that fly signs and panhandle. So trying to create a scenario when someone is talking about that person who they've seen on the street as not as homeless, right? That's someone panhandling, right? Someone experiencing homelessness is living someplace unfit for habitation. Those individuals are often not living in someplace unfit for habitation. So
why do you think that is? I know they did an expose on it probably a decade or so ago, about how some of these people were actually working for lack of a better term, like a company that would actually employ this. And I'm very careful about saying that, because I also don't want to say it's a scam and you shouldn't give money to people asking for money. But why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's just like any opportunity, right? So if entrepreneurs of all types use all types of methods in order to be successful, right? So the person obviously is there because they're successful at it, right? So whatever that particular thing is. We saw a lot during COVID. So we had a woman that was on various different corners with an oxygen tank and a sign that said she had COVID and was experiencing a pregnancy. She was on many different corners for over 2 years. It was the longest gestation period I had ever witnessed. But it was successful, right? And so,
did she ever have the baby?
There were plenty of times that many people attempted to outreach her. At that point in time, you just look at that person and you say, you're comfortable with what you're doing. We can't provide any services to you. And she was successful. whatever goal she set out for that day, she was successful in doing it. And so she did it repeatedly, just like any entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have a tendency to take people who are in a lower socioeconomic status, and we use their entrepreneurial skills as a negative against them. But if these were people who were climbing a corporate ladder, we'd say, oh my gosh, look, they were able to increase their profits by 100% margin by doing X, Y, or Z.
I actually respect that far more than any kind of like executive in a capitalist society. I'm sorry, but like
Absolutely.
she's not doing it at anyone's expense. She's not making you give her money,
Correct.
and she's not laying off and cutting jobs.
So, and we talk about expectations. When you're giving something to someone, are you giving it freely or is it with expectation, right? And
Right.
so trying to educate folks that when you hand someone a coat, you're giving it to them as a gift, not as an expectation that you'll see that coat on them 3 days from now, right?
It's so interesting because we have people who come in to volunteer, and we always do sort of an orientation and share with them who we serve and what that looks like. And sometimes we ask people, who do you think we serve? And to your point, that is mostly what people come back with, are the folks standing on the corner or standing between cars with a sign. And when we share with people how many domestic violence survivors or veterans we serve,
Yep.
when we share with them that, the stories of people who can't afford but have a job, because 100% of who we serve are below the poverty line, and most of them have a job.
Yeah.
So it's a very scary thing, but it's also incredibly eye-opening for people.
Yeah.
I think a big one is, people think homeless people are lazy.
Yeah.
And I can attest to the fact that, yes, some of them are, but some of them are like the hardest working people that I know. I mean, I have never, ever come into contact with anybody at our building or out at the camps that if I need a hand with something, they're always willing. And I think what I hear a lot from them is that they want to feel needed and they want to feel valued. And a lot of them have past skills from being employed or just hobbies. And, being homeless is a full-time job. You've got to know where you're going to eat and where you're going to shower and how you're going to get there. And there's a lot of logistical things that people don't think about because most of us have transportation. And when we want to eat, we go to the refrigerator and it's real easy. But for a lot of them, when I talk to them, I mean, their whole day, their whole week, their whole existence is just mapped out around what services they're going to be able to get to on that particular day.
That's such a great point, because they are hustling even more than the average person, because they are literally like one meal away from potential starvation, right? But also, Debbie, you mentioned it, the notion that they just don't want to work, or they don't want to work hard, or they don't have a work ethic. There are people experiencing this who you guys serve who have jobs. That, to me, I don't blame any one individual who hears the propaganda and believes it, because it kind of makes sense from that standpoint of not knowing and not seeing. I've thought that too before. But then you hear these stories, and when you really start doing the math, what does it take to not go deeper into debt and then have to leech off the system even more? But this notion that they just don't want to work hard, you think, if, what, I'm going to do something good, I'm going to go give this person a job. That's not going to solve their problem. One of you had mentioned before that it used to be that the largest population of the homeless were infants.
Correct.
And now it's almost the opposite. Who is it now?
They coin it as a silver tsunami that we're experiencing. And so it's a group of people who are in that 55 and older range.
Yeah.
And so affordable housing is a piece of that, right? And incomes for that group of people are not increasing at the rate that taxes are increasing, that utilities are increasing, everything's increasing. And so they can't outpace. And so they end up out of a home. And some of those folks have never had the opportunity to invest in that generational wealth that we talked about as homeowners, property owners, business owners. And so rents are now astronomical, right? And so if you had been accustomed to paying an $800 a month rent and now that rent's double that amount, you find yourself looking for another place to live, and there are no other places to live. And so homelessness is inevitable.
Yeah, and that group is one of the, at least what people like to believe, is one of the hardest working generations, right?
Correct.
These are people with good work ethic, but what they don't take into account is, as time has changed and the economy has evolved, or for better or worse, some of these skill sets are now completely antiquated. They've been replaced or they've been downsized, and we are not living in the same economy that the boomers had the pleasure of growing up in and going into the workforce during. So that to me was a little shocking to hear it was that age range. I would have guessed it was a little bit younger. I think that's really eye-opening.
I think we would be remiss too if we didn't talk about healthcare, right? The rising cost of healthcare. If you're someone who retired and anticipated that your retirement was going to be spent on your life, your ability to pay your bills, but all of a sudden your medications are $3,000 a month, or you have pre-existing conditions that aren't covered, you can find yourself with your income dwindling quite quickly.
That's a great segue into this, the current policies. We just got out of the government shutdown, a week or so ago at this point right now. By the time this episode releases, I pray to God that there's some kind of fix, but what's happening right now with the ACA, and what are the potential looming, impending dooms that are ahead of us?
You take that
Do you need a minute?
Clearly. I do.
Do you want some bourbon? It's under the table.
I wish bourbon could fix the problem. I truly do, because I would be passing it out, and we'd all be celebrating. But on 12/31 of 25, we have a large group of people who their healthcare, as it stands, is going to end.
Yeah.
And come January 1, those same individuals are going to be hard pressed to find the level of care that they had received prior to that. And I can with 100% confidence tell you that I have several people who I'm working with who have looming, life-threatening health conditions that their insurance carriers, managed care carriers, are dragging their feet on so that they don't have to pay for them, because they will no longer be under their managed care plan come January 1.
Why is it that this group is the most in dire peril?
People experiencing homelessness, they struggle with some of the most catastrophic health conditions, right? Living outside and living moment to moment does not provide a stable opportunity for you to be healthy.
But you probably have your regular doctor visits, right?
Not necessarily.
Yeah. They don't. Most of them are using emergency healthcare because they haven't developed primary care relationships,
or they don't have access.
Correct. And also the manner in which they're treated in the healthcare industry is extremely subpar and dismissive. And so it's often easier to not have healthcare, not go. You also have the myth that if you have open warrants or you have a checkered past, that if you go someplace, you're going to get arrested, you're going to be put away. And so we have all of these battles that we struggle against in order to just get someone through the door for the basic care. And so we start with, soggy feet, which lends into, a foot issue. And the next thing we know, we're amputating toes. By the next 6 months, we've got a foot gone and now a leg. And we just piece by piece begin to take away that person's limbs, fingers. And then let's not even go into all the things that substance use disorder can complicate. So the trifecta of mental health, physical health, substance use disorder, and poverty are a recipe for a short life.
I'm going to keep playing devil's advocate and saying stupid things so you guys can swat it down. You picked up the bait really well, Debbie. You had mentioned the ER is usually their first point of contact with a healthcare provider in any kind of normal timeline. And if it gets to that point, it's because it's catastrophic.
Well, even let's go back and talk about COVID. I mean, people who are minorities who lived in, neighborhoods that didn't have as much access as nicer neighborhoods or, right? I mean, these folks, it all snowballs. They couldn't get the help they need. And, so healthcare suffered, and people who had to not be able to go to work lost their jobs. And it was very different, right? And that snowballs for those communities, that is catastrophic.
Yeah. And now you have in the mix ICE, right? And so you probably have a lot of people who are afraid to go to any kind of documented health provider because it's like they might call ICE on me, even if they are documented, but it's really easy to say if this person's homeless, like they might not even have the papers. They might not even have the documentation. Have you seen fear of that from the community?
We've seen our partners who are referring agencies, they've seen it, they've dealt with it. And then, we find when those referrals are made, it is so interesting because people are afraid to even have paperwork attached, right? Like, What is this? Why do you need the referral? What is the paperwork and what happens? Because I think there's just a heightened nervousness around all of it.
In Summit County, our largest population of people experiencing homelessness are white males.
Sure.
We have a small percentage of people who are immigrants, legal immigrants or illegal immigrants, as it were. But circling back to your point, we have people who aren't even showing up to food pantries out of fear.
Right.
So
and that's a big problem.
We recently had a local church that sponsored a private only for those folks who are fearful to go. And so we put together special packets for them, and it wasn't advertised to the public, and they were able to go to the church to get their food. I can't imagine being a person who is afraid to go get food for fear that someone might split my family up or take me someplace that I didn't choose to go.
Well, and it's interesting because you're talking about what you serve in Summit County. For us in Cuyahoga County, we see a ton of domestic violence survivors that are women, that are people of color. And so it's sort of the same, but also they've been through all this trauma already. And now you're throwing this in the mix. It's just debilitating at times for people.
One thing that I'm proud of at Friends and Tents is, we don't ask people for a lot of information. So people generally will come in and they trust us. We don't.
That trust has to be really hard to earn.
It is. And it takes forever but broken very quickly. So you take a lot of time to build a rapport with someone and build a relationship, and that can all in a handbasket real fast. So, but, for statistical purposes and, data and grants, we ask for information, but if people don't feel comfortable giving it to us, that's fine. Whatever their comfort level is where we're at with them. So, because that's, to me, I think to everybody at FIT, that's more important than, grant money.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because you started to talk about trust and how easy it is to break that. And what we find when we're serving people is they're just blown away and almost don't even know how to respond sometimes when there's just an act of kindness, right? Yeah. And they haven't had that. They don't know that. When we go in to design a space and our designers will ask someone, what do you like? Sometimes people look at them blankly for a moment because no one's ever asked them that. And so they're not even sure how to answer. That was like a moment for me but when I first opened it, I was a designer, right? Because I didn't have a staff at the time. And it was just a moment of like, how can you describe that? What do you like? And people would look at me and say, I don't know, a microwave? And I'm like, okay, we'll get you that. But is there a color
palette?
Right. Is there, do you have little kids? You want like a little play area? What would you like? And people are just blown away by that question, which
those
is amazing
soft-
to me.
Those soft needs that most other people aren't willing to meet or don't think about it, because of course the urgency is let's fix this problem. But the fact that they no longer have thought about those things, because you might think about things on your own, but if no one's asking you about it and you're not used to that in a conversation, I think that leads to the myth is like, well, these are the outsiders. These are people who just don't know how to cope in society, right? But as you guys have already mentioned, a major part of your populations are not that whatsoever. So you have a large veteran population, and I feel like that's the easiest sell sometimes to people. It's like, because we want to take care of our troops, we want to take care of our vets, but they don't realize how many of these people are struggling, especially if they're in that age bracket, because you have like Korea, you have some of the non-vets. That's a huge population. Then you have Allison and Lerryn. You guys know Carla, who was on one of the episodes earlier this season from AGS, and we talked about how a lot of, people care about kids, and people care about adoption.
And they care about animals.
And they care about animals. Yes. So what happens when these kids age out of foster care because they weren't adopted?
They have nothing. At 18, you don't have supports and you don't have service if you haven't been adopted. And we serve a lot of kids who have aged out of foster youth. And when we meet them again, many of them have jobs, but they can't afford the apartments, or they finally get enough to afford.
You want to talk about zero generational wealth.
Correct.
You have nothing.
Nothing.
You
And no
have
support.
maybe an old hobo pack, on their shoulder from just the few things they owned, right?
And that's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's really heartbreaking.
And we care so much about kids and animals, as you said. Hey, look, I love animals. I care
Me
about
too.
kids and animals too, but you have to connect the dots. And the other big one that should be a huge sell to people, because it fits in that same bucket, is domestic violence victims. You guys said that is a huge part of the population, not just locally, but nationwide.
But also people who have experienced trauma, people don't think about that. And when you were talking earlier about, the thing about asking people, what kind of color would you like or whatever, a lot of that I think has to do with, choice. Like they're not given a lot of choice on things, so like people that, I know, we call them choice pantry, and we try to give people choices because they generally are just handed stuff and then that's it. And I know it just made me think of like last Thanksgiving when we went out to the camps, we asked people like, what would make you happy? Because no one ever asked them that, because it's almost like, do you need a toothbrush? Do you need this? It was like, and people were really like taken aback. And then I was watching something the other day and I've started asking people when I'm interacting with them at the building, tell me what it's like to be you. I mean, that's it's not like, hey, introduce yourself, like we did here, but tell me what it's like to be you in a typical day. I mean, that's a lot, that's.
Do you think their sense of identity has been stripped?
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
They're just not even, it's like having dignity and feeling valued. That's the one I've just been hearing the most of lately is like, I want to feel needed. I want to feel valued. I want people to, I know how to do stuff. I want someone to ask for help or ask them for help. Because otherwise they're just sort of floating around in life. There's no fixed address. There's no place to land. I feel like every day for them is just, they're just existing. They're not living. They're just bouncing to the next day until something tragic happens or they find themselves in the hospital or there's an accident, or it's like every day is just waiting for what's going to happen because everything is so unknown.
That is heartbreaking on such a deep level for the people who love to talk about mental health. And that's a whole other episode of mental health influencers on social media. But what we saw a lot of the younger millennials and Gen Z is they all took a look at the data and said, we're never going to out earn our parents. Most of us are not going to be able to buy homes. So we might as well get the things in our lives that keep us happy. And that's those soft things. And when you don't have the tangibles, and then you don't have the soft needs, holy shit, like you're barely existing.
You're barely existing, and you just hit on it, right? Like, people don't believe sometimes that the folks who need the help should be handled and given dignity and just handled in a way that they're valued, and
they're sucking off the government
or giving help at all.
Yeah.
getting help at all.
They're just
Exactly.
panhandlers. They're a scourge on society. I don't not care. They're still humans, but can't we just put them in a camp or something? I mean, there is this mindset, which leads to another great myth is, yes, the problem is bad, but it's not going to happen to me. I would not allow myself to become homeless or to become somebody who's in that great of need.
I'll jump to the myth that's attached to that is that there's help for everyone.
Well, there's resources everywhere. All they have to do is go to a shelter or a soup kitchen.
Right. Ask.
Last Thursday, I sat in a meeting where I learned that our local men's shelter was already on overflow and people were sleeping on the floor last Thursday.
But they should just be happy they have a roof over their head.
So we look at the demographics of when shelters
You're allowed
fill.
to say, Matt, shut the hell up. I'm going to punch you.
So good.
Like,
So
I'm
good.
teeing you up, man. Just knock it down.
Listen, Matt, I have a 25-year-old, a 23-year-old, and a 20-year-old. I know how to fight for conversation. I will get in there, brother. It's all good. It's all good.
Yes.
So, there's a shelter bed available for anybody who wants one.
Bullshit, right?
Absolute bullshit every day. In the summer, in the winter, in the spring, in the fall, absolute bullshit, right? I'm a domestic violence victim. There's a place for me to go and be safe. Bullshit. There is not. I'm in the middle of a mental health crisis. There's a place for me to land.
I know. There's barely a place for us to land who already have homes and all of our necessities when it comes to mental health.
Even care, right?
Yeah.
I can show up at the hospital and get the care I need as someone experiencing a mental health crisis. Not the case. I'm a substance use user, and I need a place that fits all of my needs wrapped up in one.
Well, just go look. Just the government has stuff. I know there's so many people who are just sucking off the teat of the system. Just go there, get your handouts, find a job, buy a nice suit, do an interview. I don't understand. The resources exist.
So in theory, those resources exist, right? We would like to think as a society that if you're in need, that there's an opportunity to meet that need. I would challenge you to pick up the phone and call a shelter and ask if there's a bed available. I would challenge you to find a mental health provider that can see you within the first 24 hours of your crisis. I would challenge you to have someone experience substance use disorder and find that perfect space for them to be that will take them in and provide the care they need and accept their insurance. These are things that take time and resources that aren't available, but as a society, we think they are every day. Just go get the help you need because it exists.
And you have to be in a mindset of continuity.
And you have to be able to advocate for yourself. And so if you're experiencing a mental health crisis or you're in some sort of psychosis because of drugs, you are not able to advocate for yourself. And even when Lerryn and I do that in a medical setting or whatever, we're not often well received either, because it's like, who are you?
You're a narc, man.
Yeah, well, yeah. And, it's like, so, and imagine how we feel when we call somebody and we're on hold for an hour.
Right.
These are people who they might have 1% on their phone because they haven't been able to charge it. They don't have the patience level to wait on hold, or they don't have a phone. Or I know when I'm making appointments for people and they're like, well, we're going to need to talk to him. And I'm like, well, he's not with me. He doesn't have a phone. And they're like, well, just have him stop by over at the hospital. What? No, that's never going to happen.
Do you want me to put up the bat signal? How is this going to happen?
That's not going to happen.
Do you guys have messenger pigeons that you can send out to your population?
The Pony Express. I'm like, this is not a thing. And when I'm on the phone with them trying to explain it,
I cannot wait till next time I'm in downtown Akron.
and you see
and here comes Allison on a horse with her satchel.
More effective. I mean, at this point, because it's just the homeless people are already struggling when they're going to the hospital or whatever, because they're generally not treated very well. And then on top of that, it's like this waiting game, and they don't know what questions to ask, and they don't know what to do, and everybody there. And yes, is there a social worker that's supposed to be there? Sure. But that person's probably got 50 people on their case load for the morning.
They're overworked and underpaid as well. And so are the nurses and everybody else. And,
for sure.
I want to make sure that people understand. We're not saying hospitals are bad and doctors. It has nothing to do with that. It is the system and the way it's set up.
The system is overwhelmed to begin with as well.
We're stewards of broken systems.
That's a lovely and horrible way to look at it.
We are stewards of broken systems, and we will continue to fund and advocate for broken systems instead of looking at the inherent issues and working towards a solution. And we do it decade after decade. We don't learn our lesson. We are the wealthiest, one of the wealthiest, advanced nations, but we
can't see past the end of our own nose.
Correct.
But I would also add that we tell folks all the time, and if you really think about it, most of us are one crisis away from being in the same spot as all the people we support and serve, right? We see people who come across, state lines for medical treatment because they have this horrible, all of a sudden diagnosis. We have wonderful healthcare in Cleveland, and now they had to give up their home. They don't have anywhere to go or land. They don't have a job. Healthcare is incredibly expensive, as we've talked about. And so for so many people, they are right in that same spot, right? Just slightly away from that.
The system sells the American dream, the facade that you're one good idea or one good connection away from inheriting all this wealth, when the truth is you're so much closer to the people that you guys serve.
The land of opportunity has turned into the land of landing in poverty, right? Like where all this shift is, and we're not creating a culture where we even can see it, right? We continue to just lower the lower classes.
Yeah. The wealth gap is widening. And again, generational wealth was one of the things keeping the middle class and consumerism going. And it's disappearing. And it's almost ironic that today is Black Friday, the day we're recording this episode. And you think about how Black Friday has become its own thing. It's the day after Thanksgiving. So they're like, okay, now we can stop talking about Thanksgiving because it's Christmas time. It's time to buy stuff. And the level of expectations that especially put on parents and other people. There's so many interesting points that have come up that I would love to unpack all of them, but we can't. I'll say you all made some great points there. One of the things about the resources is, I think, Allison, are you Project 34?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
So Project 34, I was actually telling people at Fit last night about you and what you do. So Project 34 is the sort of like the bridge for our homeless friends that have recently become housed. And so at our new building, we have the space now to have housewares and things like that for those individuals, and trying to provide for them, what you do. Just, we don't go into their space. Well, I mean, we sometimes do, but, just to provide for them the basic things to get started, but more importantly, that we're going to continue to be there, because it's easy to set up somebody's apartment and leave.
Right.
It's like, hey, cool. It's like when you set up your kid's dorm.
The great home makeover or something like, move that bus. And it's like the bus just took all of our shit.
Mine
too.
would just be move our van. So, it's like, okay. But we want to be able to provide the support long term, because if they've received, a housing voucher or something from another organization, once that's done, that's sort of it. And so we make a point to, check in on people. Do you need stuff? Do you need, help with basic, budgeting? How are we going to keep this place? Because everybody thinks like, oh man, you got somewhere to live? Cool, we're done. No, that's just like the next step.
And again, it's called Project 34 because 34 represents
34% of where homeless people are living is considered uninhabitable. So we had Josh Fitzgerald did a photo gallery for us that and that hangs in our lobby, but that was what he referred to it as. And so that's sort of how it got coined. But yeah, those are
to think about that. So it's like, well, they should be happy they have somewhere. It's uninhabitable. Think about the grossest place you ever stayed or lived for a short period of time. Like, there are places that I remember looking at a house and I almost bought it. And then we found all this like mold and stuff. And I was like, no. Like, to think about, and still that would have been a castle compared to what some of these people have. So this idea that there are resources, all of these things, and something like struck me as we're sitting here talking about it, that I think it's lost in the conversation, or at least in people's minds, we compartmentalize it. We all have mental health crises all the time. COVID, the numbers have spiked since 2020. They're only getting worse. We talk about mental health on the show all the time. I cannot be the only person at this table who's experienced depression or anxiety, right? I had one or two very scary panic attacks in my life, but I was in a home that had heat, that had electricity, that was a beautiful house. And when most of us think about, oh my God, if we're having a really bad day, we get to go to our comfortable bed and, curl up in a blanket, put our heads on our pillows. I'm like, oh, which one of my 8 million streaming services am I going to watch? Put on the sound machine. We take for granted the most basic amenities that these people, so they're having a mental health crisis and a panic attack, and there is no safe place. Like, you don't have a place that you get to go when you're just not feeling yourself.
You bring up a really good point, Matt, is that our friends on the street are living their whole life there, right? Yeah. So when they're experiencing that crisis, it's out for everyone to see, or it's in an encampment where other people are just barely hanging on. And so those individuals are trying to figure out how they combat that. This person is now maybe experiencing some psychosis that, becomes violent. And then we also have the other experience is that our folks who are experiencing chronic homelessness in that first 6 months of receiving housing, we have a high rate of suicide, a high rate of return to substance use disorder, a high rate of like mental health crash. Change is hard, even if it's for good. And so if you're now used to living outside and moving about your day, trying to create a scenario for gaining everything you need, and now you're in scattered housing and you're by yourself. No.
And being by yourself is the other part that I wanted to say was, so we look at it from this point of mental health, but like community and love are the only things that make even surviving and existing worth it, right? Most of us at this table would never stay homeless for long because we have people in our circles, friends, family, colleagues, who would not let us live on the streets, right? They would force us, even against our will, to some point. They would kidnap us and put us up. Now, mental health, the people who need help the most sometimes are the ones who won't accept it. But to think that there's nobody in your life who is like, I will not allow this person. And I'm not saying that there is no one who wants that. They certainly, I'm sure, have people, but
there's a lot of bridges burned.
Exactly. Yes. And a lot of that is due to mental health, drug use, and everything else.
Yeah. A catastrophic loss of family or community, as Alan Graham out of a Community First Village in Austin, Texas, it's catastrophic loss of family or support system. We can round it down. They have the largest tiny home community that is successful in bridging the gap between homelessness and permanent housing. And they're growing by leaps and bounds in Austin. They're on their phase 3 and they have a beautiful space that people live in. I vacation there and stay in an Airbnb on the property because it's so nice.
Oh, wow.
It is beautiful. It's, it is the gold standard. But we can ultimately root it back. And that's not to say that the family doesn't exist. It's the family's been burnt out. The support systems have been burnt out, and you have empathy for everyone involved, right?
Yeah.
And also there's a shame. Some people don't return because of shame, and then that cycle just becomes their norm, right? And so shame and blame just constant, and it eats you up.
Just to clarify too, I'm not saying that, like you said, there's no blame there. Every situation is different. There's context to all of it. But to put myself in the shoes of somebody who is in that situation, who may have been the person who burned those bridges, who set their own life ablaze, that doesn't make me care any less. That still sucks to imagine being in that person's shoes, if they have shoes. I mean, that's honestly, so I'll speak for myself. You guys don't have to say this. I'm going to say to our audience and to the people out there, one, I think we all have a social imperative. Like, you are much sooner to join those masses than you are to be flying on a private jet with Elon Musk. It's just not going to happen, right? You have a moral imperative, in my opinion. And morality, of course, is subjective, but I think most civilizations that were not animalistic through time have said, we have to care about the people who are the most vulnerable. And we can't divide homelessness from the rest of the mass, because the more we do that, the more we're actually building up this group that we're eventually going to join. The wealth gap is only getting larger. So even from a capitalistic standpoint, there's an imperative there. And then I have so many religious people in my family and friend groups and everything else. And I'm a very spiritual person. I have faith. I have no problem with like religion in a nutshell. But there is very much a spiritual imperative here too. And Deuteronomy 15 verses 7 and 8 says essentially, if a person's in need, you should not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted. You need to instead be open-handed, lend freely. It says it directly in the same scripture that you might be using to say we don't need to care about these people. There are imperatives that as just a human, you need to give a shit about. And that's coming from me. You need to give a shit. It impacts you way more than what you think. And the odds are super, super high that somebody in your circle is going to be one of those people in the near future who's needing the resources from the very lovely people at this table. And the thing that all three of you said and all of you have embodied in this conversation is every single living human deserves dignity. They deserve care. They deserve love. So what the hell can people do? What can we do? I'm somebody who cares, right? I don't have time, let's say, to volunteer. What are the many ways that we as a society, and yes, the system's broken. We got to have a whole other podcast about how we fix the system. But what can each person do? Voting is part of the system fix, right? What are the other things that we can do?
Kindness. It starts by not looking away.
So that guy who maybe he's having that bad day out in public, we should videotape them and say, look at this asshole, right?
Matt?
Yeah. Roll those sleeves up.
Matt? No. So, just being kind, right? You don't have to respond to someone's need, but you can respond to them as a human being, a wave, eye contact, and then also looking in your own home what you have a surplus of. Yeah. Right. There are plenty of organizations that are begging for your linens and your towels that you're replacing. There are plenty of people who would love those. Love those items that you receive. We
have every color imagined.
And
that's right.
Aunt Karen gave you the same Christmas gift for the last 3 years that's been sitting in your back closet. Get rid of those things that aren't serving you in your home and put them into service to others.
But I do want to say it's interesting because, right, we love that, but it goes back to the dignity because, right, think about what you are donating and going back to thinking about what gives somebody a good feeling. And, again, we have an 18,000 foot warehouse filled with stuff. And it gives us choice so that we can reflect the person we're serving. And that is important because it just sets somebody up for success. So all of those things are wonderful. And I just, again, go back to educating people. Give with dignity, right? Think about things you'd want in your own home. That's what we're trying to do.
Everyone
for folks.
has standards.
That's right.
Like
everyone has standards.
When I mean, yesterday I looked at everybody as I was sorting clothes and I was like, guess where I never wanted to work? The clothing store. But it's like we're real,
mindful.
not for a better word, picky, like what we're going to put out, because this is someone who is in need of something. And, like, I get it. Some people feel bad about discarding things, but like sometimes it's ready to be discarded.
Okay, I'm going to start with I'm going to throw my own family under the bus. So you talked about coming from a family that volunteers. And so when my husband and I, when our kids were little, we're like, all right, listen, you guys get to pick. We want to help you research and pick an organization. We celebrate both Hanukkah and Christmas. So you decide which one. For Hanukkah, we can give to an organization or get involved or volunteer or do something. And then for Christmas, we're going to donate. So we're going to think about whatever, but we'll get gifts for one as well, because the kids certainly don't need for anything. So we send the kids up to their room and they come back with my girls come back with broken crayons, a doll with, missing legs, some kind of ripped whatever. And I was like, all right, we need a little help here to understand what that's about, right? And I think that's super important, especially, I say this to my own kids. We live in a bubble. Yeah. You grew up in a bubble. So
it's beautiful because it's a learning moment. It's not a learning shame. Moment. It's not going, you son of a bitch.
No.
You gave me a dirty old shirt with a hole in it. Like,
it matters how you share that lesson.
Yeah.
But what I do love is even for Humble, we have so many schools and kids and families that want to bring their kids because that's the next generation.
Right.
And so for me to be able to help them understand what matters and then grow, go forth, and help the next generation.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I love this time of year. There's a lot of charities who do toy drives and stuff for kids, and they say unopened toys. Mm-hmm. And that isn't because they're trying to be bougie and outdo somebody else. It's because like kids deserve to be able to open a brand new toy. To say that they're not deserving of that, it takes away from the entire notion of trying to do good.
And I'm going to go one step further because we do the same.
You're like, my kids want all the toys.
Right, they do. But that's my kids. We won't even talk about that. Now we have grandkids. But we do the same with unopened toys in our organization. But the reason we do it isn't so the kids necessarily have something new. It's so the parents can give it.
Yep.
We'll give wrapping paper and the gifts.
Yes.
We put it away because think about as a parent who maybe can't give to your kids this year and you want to feel that joy yourself.
Yeah.
That is important, right? This is all part of that healing process on people's journey.
The Amazon items that we receive, a lot of people say, well, why would somebody experiencing homelessness need, a Hello Kitty purse? And I said, that individual picked it because there's somebody in their life that they want to give it to, right?
Them joy,
And so, and some of these folks have been estranged from their family and children, but they're still planting gifts for them, right? And so they're foraging for things that they're going to drop off to someone who is the bridge to their child. And their child may never know that it came from them.
Wow.
But it's important. And so we automatically think we know what someone needs and it's the basics, right? Someone experiencing homelessness only needs the basics. No, they need access to other items too, just for that human touch and contact.
And I think homeless people are some of the most selfless people that I've ever met.
Indeed.
Because, I work with kids and they're not always selfless and my
what
I know right
what grade
I teach 8th grade. So
I may have been my biggest asshole self.
It's okay. 8th grade boys remind me of homeless guys. Like that's what I've been realizing lately this week. I was like, I see a lot of similarities. But the selflessness, always worried about other people, always worried about people in their camp. I mean, I'm not saying like 100% of the time because they do shady things sometimes, but but for the most part, that's why people always ask me like, aren't you like scared? Aren't you like no. Like, I'm more scared of like people who aren't homeless, I think, at this point, because they're not gonna, I don't think they're ever gonna hurt me. They're not gonna, bite the hand that feeds them. They're not going to, we have a relationship, and I never worry about that, but I just feel all the time so selfless, always. Even, we went out to the camps last week and it was like, oh, can I take this? But it's for so-and-so. It's not even for me, like their life is so chaotic sometimes, but yet they're still thinking about how they can make someone else happy.
Right.
We went back to meet with a mom and a son, a 16-year-old who we had served. To your point, we went back a year later just to see how they were doing. Every single thing was in exactly the same place. The table was set with the same place settings. The throw pillows that we put a little chop in the middle still had the chop. Like, I think to your point, it was like having this beautiful stuff. I asked the mom about it, and she's like, we love it. We take such good care because this is
prideful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And so that is truly, made me cry.
Yeah.
We talked about a couple of things that people should stop doing. I'll call this out. Stop being the person who needs to document your giving. I'm not saying, like, I think some of these all have their own context, or all are different. But if you're like, today I'm going to give $100, dude, you didn't change this person's life, but you're trying to get views for it, and you're doing more harm than you are doing good. Because then people get the impression of, well, then me giving this guy $5 doesn't even matter. I can only do something big. But I also just hate that shit. You're doing good. You're canceling out the karma there, man. Is there something else that you would like to see people stop doing?
You bring up the $5 thing. Like, this is so funny. So, I mean, inevitably, anytime there's a forum that someone's talking about someone experiencing homelessness, they got to talk about, I saw him outside of that. I'm sorry, I got to catch myself because it's hard. I saw him outside the bingo hall. They were going in there. I gave him $5 and they went in that bingo hall, and instead of buying what they needed, or I saw them buy a lottery ticket. This
guy's just going to buy drugs and booze.
If you had nothing, would you not take the chance for $5 to turn into something more than $5?
Especially if you're living moment to moment, day to day.
Would you not try? Would you not try?
I go invest it.
And would you?
Because the system that's broken that fucked me, I'm going to turn around and invest back in it.
And does scratching a lottery ticket bring you just the least amount of endorphins or joy?
A tiny bit of hope in your horrible
whatever
day?
the hope is. So if we could just stop judging how people spend the $5 that they've been given, your $5, just, is it that important that we judge it? Do we need to judge every decision someone makes? Because it's not what they would do. It's not what they would do.
Yeah.
I don't live your life. You don't live mine. I don't live theirs. Let's allow people to be people and make a choice.
Well, and in the beginning of the pandemic, we would serve folks who had a TV and like nothing else. And I just think it's so interesting how many people were so offended that someone would have a TV. And my thought is their kids can't go anywhere and they can't do anything because everything's closed. Yeah. And we're in the OG pandemic. And, there was no schools, and many of the schools couldn't afford to set the kids up at home with laptops down in the city. So yes, they had TVs. What do you want a parent to be able to do who still has to work or who still has to do something or go out and try to find? So it's shifting. It's like give without judgment.
And I think a lot of that, I'm sorry, is driven by propaganda.
Oh,
some of it is ignorance, but a lot of it is propaganda. And the way that people look at policy and stuff is like, I don't want these freeloaders. And as we've myth busted the hell out of that today, Many of these people are not freeloaders in any way whatsoever.
Correct. And we also have this sense that if someone showed up in a vehicle, like they're not what they say they are. And like we have a culture of Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, all these methods. Our folks, some of them are renting cars in order to make a living. So when they show up in that vehicle that you think is brand stinking new and they're still living outside, well, it's that person, they're a sham. And like, they're an entrepreneur. They just rented the car from Enterprise and they're using it today to make money. And because we always want to, it's the negative that we want to focus on. 95% of what's happening is beautiful, but we will always focus on that 5% negative. Same with the needy and the greedy. I always tell our new volunteers, we serve the needy and the greedy. Now, you will focus on the greedy because it will strike you and it'll hurt your heart. But in actuality, they're a small percentage of the people we serve, but it's inherent nature, right?
Yeah.
We're just drawn to the negative.
Before we wrap up and have each of you plug your URLs and other information, I'd like to ask a random question at the end of every episode. So here's my random question for today. And sorry if this goes over your heads, but I'm a nerd. So you have the Infinity Gauntlet from Marvel, Thanos, and you snap your fingers and one thing, somebody goes out there, snaps their fingers, and every unhoused person is now housed. What cause do you pick up next?
Animals.
How dare you?
No. Oh, no. I actually agree with that so much.
I don't know. Mine would just still be some sort of advocacy for
You would
anybody.
unhouse people just so you can help them get housed.
not just advocating for homeless people. I just think that's in my nature.
Advocate for the vulnerable.
Anybody. I mean, I just feel like that's what I would continue to do.
Mental health.
Yeah.
If I could be an advocate full-time for mental health,
Well, thank you all for being here today. This was a great conversation. And I always go in knowing I'm going to learn something. I learned a lot of stuff and I did my homework, this was great. And I can see it in all of your faces as you're talking, not just how much you care, but how much you deeply care. Like there's so much emotion in when you're talking about this, and it isn't from a place of damn whoever, we're not, yes, there are people we can certainly point fingers at, but you give a damn. And that is the kind of stuff that I want to highlight on this show this season, especially because it's like, there is hope out there. You just got to look for it. You guys aren't the ones being advertised, right? Like, stop watching those damn influencers who give away the $100 or a haircut. Let's go around real quick. Humble Design, where can people go?
humbledesign.org, our website. We're located in Solon. We always need people, stuff, and funds. And we just love all the community that we get. So everybody's welcome.
Awesome. Lerryn.
thehomelesscharity.org is our website. We have a large Facebook presence. Again, Homeless Charity and Village is our Facebook page. And our outreach house is located in the Middlebury neighborhood of Akron. And we welcome folks to drop by anytime. 47 North Arlington, Akron, Ohio, 44305.
And Allison, last but not least.
Friends and Tents. We're located in Akron, 445 West Cedar. Friendsandtents.com. We have a Facebook page as well. That's where most of our following is. We always need volunteers.
And for those of you who are outside of these counties or even outside of the state, there are tons of organizations like this in your area who partner either on the small end or the large end. Give what you can and what you want and do it because you feel like it's the right thing to do. And yeah, karma, you'll get a little bit of good karma. I will guarantee you'll get a little bit of good karma. And here's what I'll ask all of you out there to do is next time you're having a rough day and what warms you up is a nice blanket or a comfort TV show or your favorite pillow or your best friend, think about that luxury and how other people don't have even the smallest amount of that. That is hard to imagine, but when you really think about it, it's very, very impactful and it's hard to look away from that problem. Thank you, all of you, for being here today. I love what you do. I will continue to follow what you do, and we will always be big supporters of your organization. So thank you, and hopefully we can get these numbers down. We just need enough people who give a shit, and these three give a shit. We'll see you next time.
We just went there. Now you can go to thegoingtherepodcast.com for links to all the podcast platforms, our socials, and of course, YouTube. While you're at it, give us a rating, share with a friend, and subscribe.
This podcast is brought to you in part by its host and Frame One Media, in association with Kaylee Williams, Joe Calley, and Bobby Thomas.